Okay.
Hello, viewers. Our attempt today will be to travel back in time and look at what was possibly one of the most unexpected yet ghastly attacks uh, on India. The year was 1984 when Ravindra Hareshwari Matreji, who was a second-ranking officer serving in the Indian Consular Office in Birmingham, after buying a birthday cake for his teenage daughter, took the public bus home and was going to go back home to celebrate with his family this little milestone in a quiet way. Little that the family knew that the fateful day would be the last time they would have ever met, and Ravindra Matreji was essentially abducted in a gruesome way by KLF, which was the Kashmir Liberation Front, an offshoot of Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front uh, terrorists, and was essentially kept for 2 days before he was shot in cold blood. And his body was then discovered later on the 6th of February by Scotland Yard uh, on a street of Birmingham. So we are essentially commemorating the memories of Ravindraji, and to do so, we have a number of keynote panelists with us, and one of them who is a family member of Ravindraji, the teenage daughter Asha Matreji, who's now Asha D'Souza. So she has agreed to come on this particular discussion and chime in with her sort of understanding of the subject and her emotions attached to this particular subject. So Asha ji, welcome. A very good evening to you. Um, it must have been absolutely dreadful time for you and your mother Shobha ji at that point. I've read a few articles where it said that you were so busy consoling your mother at the time that you possibly couldn't even comprehend what was essentially happening. So, do you want to give us a bit of an insight into what essentially played out on that ghastly evening of the 3rd of February, 1984?
Actually, it's quite crystal clear in my mind. We were supposed to go out for dinner to some colleague's house, and we kept waiting for dad to come home. And it got late, and my mother said that maybe he's got delayed in office, maybe he's got caught up chatting with some friends because my father was one of those really friendly people. He knew a lot of people knew him. He was always very, very helpful with everyone, ready to stop and chat. So she thought maybe that had happened, so we kept waiting. But as the time went by, we started getting worried that it normally took him about half an hour or 40 minutes maximum by bus, and then it was just a 5-minute walk home from the bus stop. And it was a winter evening, so obviously in England it gets dark really fast, and it was quite so we kept wondering where he had gone. We started calling everybody, thinking that maybe he got caught up, went to someone's house to help them out, or there was some emergency, and there was no sign of him. And then of course his colleagues all kind of got worried as well. They started calling each other. They went to the police station finally late in the night, and then they were told that a person has to be you can't register a missing person's case for 24 hours. And then by that time, it was the next morning, the demands had already come in, and the whole machinery started getting into motion. But I remember staying up the night with my mother in the living room. We didn't go to our bedroom to sleep. She was on one couch, I was on the other, kind of half asleep, hoping against hope that the bell would ring and he would just walk in. But it was not to be. And yeah, I remember talking to the Scotland Yard officers. There was one stationed in our house. There were police outside to give us protection. Talking to them, telling them about my dad's movements, his daily routine, what he was wearing, what he had eaten, describing his clothes, and all of that, helping them out as much as possible. I actually went with them and showed them the routes that he took every day to walk to the bus stop. So yeah, all these things are quite still fresh in my head even today.
And at the time, how helpful were the consulate, the government staff based out of India, the politicians, from India? I recall one of your interviews. You spoke about Indira Gandhi being extremely warm when she visited your family, and she paid
Yes.
tribute to your parents. Sorry, your grandparents. I beg your pardon.
Yeah,
And
she
so,
met
do you want to
my
give us a
dad's mother. Yeah, she did. She did come to Vikhroli in Mumbai. It's a suburb of Mumbai where my dad's younger brother, my dad's younger sister, my mom's younger sister is married to my dad's younger brother. So it's a very close family relation from both sides. And she had come to the house, but at the end of the day, it's politicians being nice to you and all of that is all very well, but the person is gone, right? And it really brings home the point about how people are treated differently if they are an ordinary citizen, and how they are treated differently if they are a politician's daughter. Because the following year, when Mehbooba Mufti was kidnapped, there was no question of not
not not
negotiating.
not Mehbooba Mufti, but Mehbooba
Sorry,
Mufti's
her
sister.
sister, whatever. Yeah. So there was no question of not negotiating with terrorists, which was the stance Indira Gandhi had taken. It was, the whoever was asked for whom she was kidnapped, that person was released. So one really wonders what is the cost of human life uh, when it
So
comes to an
are
ordinary.
you drawing a parallel to say that a diplomat's life was probably not as worthy as a home minister's daughter, for instance?
Yeah,
Is that a
I mean
parallel that
that's
you're
the
so
conclusion
you're
that one can reach, right? Because
so
it
you're
was so
saying
ironic that it
you're
happened
saying
the
that
very next year.
more could have done by the state apparatus at the time to ensure that
Definitely,
Ravindraji, could have come back home and could have celebrated your 14th birthday as a family together.
definitely. I think it would have definitely, because why would a terrorist get normally when they're asking for ransom, there is negotiation, there is a lot of discussion that happens back and forth. He was kidnapped on the 3rd, and his dead body was found in a field, actually not in the streets of Birmingham. It was in a field in Leicestershire, where his body was found. Why would they get, why would they get spooked, or why would they be panicked in 2 days? What was the, and at that time, because I was so young, it didn't even occur to any of us to actually demand to speak to my father, to be a part of the negotiation deal, to kind of understand what was going on. We kind of just um, we were so overwhelmed by the entire thing that was happening that it didn't occur to us. And now when I look back at it, I definitely wonder that if I was at that age, I was a little older, or maybe had more experience, I would have definitely been a part of the entire discussion that happened. So why was, in 2 days, why would the terrorists get spooked and kill someone, and kill someone as important as my dad? You normally, what is the way things happen? Normally when a person is held hostage, that there are negotiations, there are delays, there are delay tactics which happen. In the meanwhile, the police keep looking. Something could have happened, right?
So you're saying that the state apparatus could have done definitely more to ensure that
100%,
Mr. Matre could have
100%.
come back alive.
Of course,
Um,
of course.
as a 14-year-old, you probably didn't know who Maqbul Bhatt was, and you probably
No.
didn't know what JKLF essentially stood for, or what their political aspirations or
Yeah.
ambitions were. How did your journey essentially shape up from there on? Because suddenly you were at the age of 14, and you suddenly had to grow up so much more within a span of a few days. So walk us through that journey if you can.
Actually, my family has been amazing. I cannot thank them enough. They stood by us like a rock. They looked after us. They made sure that we were okay. They were there with us throughout thick and thin for the first number of years. And even today, we are very close. And I'll always be grateful to my uncles, my aunts, my mom's sisters, dad's younger brother, my grandparents, because it was their support, their love, their caring that helped us to actually recover from the shock. And They were grieving too, mind you. You know, my uncle had lost his brother, my grandmother had lost a son, and nothing is worse than a parent losing a child. You know, that's not natural. That's not what nature is. It's, you know, the parents die before, and she was so strong. And my grandparents on my mom's side as well, my mom's parents, they were amazing as well. They were really really supportive. They made sure that we were protected. They made sure that you know, someone was always there with us initially. So yes, I did have to grow up in a hurry, because obviously, you know, the reality hits you, the newspapers, the and imagine in those days
Hmm.
we didn't even have social media. We didn't have paparazzi the way it is now. We didn't have
Hmm.
any of the multiple TV channels that exist
Hmm.
today. But it was difficult. But thanks to my family and our family friends, we really managed to hold our you know, kind of recover from it slowly, and grieve, and get back into semblance of a normal life. But of course, you feel the void every single day. And um, every time it's my birthday, it's always tinged with sadness
Memories
and
of
memories
your,
of my dad.
of
And
course.
my mother, of course, it has been amazing. I mean, she was so strong, and she made sure that I had a normal teenage you know, teenage years of my life.
Upbringing. Yeah.
So
Um, so, 11th of February was the day when, President Zail Singh essentially signed the hanging notification for Maqbul Butt, and he was formally hung on the 11th of February. Did that give your family any sort of closure, any sort of comfort, that knowing that, here was a man who, terrorized a good part of the nation, killed a CID officer in India, and your father was essentially abducted as a recourse to have him released. Did that give your family any sort of comfort, knowing that he was finally taken to task by the government of the day?
Yeah, of course. I mean, any terrorist who is working against the unity and the peace of our nation is sentenced rightfully. Definitely, and the fact that, you know, his death was not completely in vain. The fact that this person whose release was asked was at least convicted, and, you know, was. But you know, it's this. Gandhiji said, "No, an eye for an eye makes the world go blind." So I don't know really. I mean, all these people are misguided, and some of them are get carried away by propaganda. So I feel sad as well. You know, it's a sad thing. Nobody comes out the winner. Yes, it is a bit of a solace in a way that yes, it was he was sentenced, but at the end of the day, my dad is not going to come back, right? And who the poor CID officer who Makbul Bhatt killed, his family is grieving as well. Is so it's
I understand. I
just
understand.
sad.
But thank you so much, Asha ji. I'd like to go to Siddharth Ganju ji next, if that's okay.
Sure.
Siddharth ji, welcome to this talk show. Your emotions about your grandfather. So your grandfather, Justice Ganju, was the judge who essentially pronounced the death sentence for Makbul Butt, and the consequence that he had to face in 1989 was also, he laid a victim he lay as a victim to the terrorists who essentially eventually ended up taking his life. Walk us through your experiences of what essentially transpired in 1989 as a consequence of this ghastly terrorist attack on your family.
Uh, Adit, not a lot has been said or written about the events which unfolded from the February of 1984, which is when Ravindra Mahatreji was abducted, to the point till date. The media at large, the politicians, the global communities who have been tracking the conflict, they all talk about 1987 as being the trigger point for the subsequent terrorist upsurge that happened in this state of JNK. I'm very clear it was much before. Like mentioned earlier as well, starting with the abduction and killing of Ravindra Matreji. Right after the killing and abduction of Ravindra Matreji, in that very month of February 1984 is when the first bomb attack took place, intended to kill my grandfather at that point in time. It happened in our house with all the family members present there. We were lucky, the grace of God, we survived. But starting that February of 1984 till the time they finally succeeded in, whatever they had set out to do, by with his murder on the 4th of November 1989, there were at least 2 to 3 attempts on his life every year. Now, the reason I mention this is because there is a lot of convoluted narrative out there. There is a lot of narrative which is bereft of facts, uh, and at some point in time that needs to be set straight. The facts as they were need to be brought out without any emotion, without any twist to what the facts of the day were. Coming back to the point you asked us about our feelings and emotion, the very fact that there was a bomb attack on the house with the whole family present, we always were apprehensive, and it was not one of a kind event. They kept persisting till the time they succeeded in what they were trying to do. So we were apprehensive, we were fearful for his life, our lives, everybody else as well in the family.
Right. Thank you, Siddharth Ganjuji. In the meanwhile, Ashaji, I'd like to thank you again for taking our time and joining on such a short notice. The one last question that I actually had for you was when Indira Gandhi ji came to meet your mother and your grandparents, and she essentially said, "I understand a mother's feeling of loss. I'm a mother too." Uh, was that, do you think, was it just lip service at the end of the day? Was she just
No,
playing a politician at the end of the day, or did you feel that
no, no, no.
she was extremely genuine about her cause and
Yeah,
concern about?
I think that she was. I don't think she was paying lip service. I wasn't there personally. My She met my dad's mom, my grandmother, my dadi, in the Vikroli house. I wasn't there, but I can't believe, or I would like to believe that she was a mother. She was a grandmother.
Hmm.
She must
Hmm.
have felt the thing, and it's a terrible decision to take. It's the burden of the
Hmm.
decision that I will not negotiate with terrorists is a terrible decision. At the end of the day, it weighs heavily on someone. Someone's life is in your hands.
Hmm.
So I don't think she was fake, or I don't think she was being a politician when she
Fair
said
point.
that. I'm sure
Actually,
she.
at the same time, what do you think was the approach of the British government, the police, the Scotland Yard? Was there enough urgency? Was there enough
Yes,
seriousness from their
they
end
were.
to
Yeah,
tackle?
yeah, yeah. I can't. They were extremely protective about us. They were very serious. They swung into action immediately. They had sealed all the ports. I remember there were posters everywhere about my dad. Have you seen this man? I remember that. They were very professional, very thorough. They made sure that there were officers stationed in our house at the in the back garden, in the front, in the house with us. I remember getting a call with one guy saying we will avenge this or something. It was just one of those somebody from the community who had the Indian community, and they immediately swung into action. They went to his house, and they kind of had a conversation to figure out how serious he was, or what he meant by that remark. And they were really professional, very good, and they were in touch with us even afterwards for a bit, because there was some paperwork that had to be done, and they're very polite and extremely they took the thing seriously. I was a 14-year-old, but I remember it being very professionally handled, and we never had any complaints. We were protected at all times.
Right. Thank you so much, Asha ji. You've been extremely kind and extremely, forthcoming with all your, emotions today. And we wish you all the best. And
Thank you.
we'll definitely talk to you sometime in the future.
I just
Thank you,
want to
Asha
say
ji.
that thank you so much for all of you for taking time out to remember my dad and to do this on this day. I'm very grateful. I really appreciate your commitment and your enthusiasm for this and your love for my father. So, thanks so much. I really, really appreciate that. And I wish you all the best. Thank you
Thank you,
again.
Asha ji. Thank you. Uh, Vinodji, I wanted to come to you next because you're part of the community, the British diaspora, and I wanted your opinion on what do you think was the mood of those people working in the consular services within the Indian High Commission at the time? Did they ever feel a sense of that our lives could be at jeopardy as well? Given the fact that here was his, he was assistant high commissioner serving as a second ranking officer in the Indian consulate in Birmingham. So he wasn't an ordinary civilian just walking on the road. At the end of the day, he was a diplomat. So if a diplomat's life could be at risk, what was the mood of the British diaspora, the British Indian diaspora at the time? Ji Vinodji.
Thanks, Aditji, for asking that question. I mean, firstly, I personally was not in the country at that time. I was
Hmm.
still in India, and I came into this country a bit later. So I wouldn't have the first-hand experience of how the community felt at the time and how what was the mood in the consulate, in the wider High Commission fraternity, and of course the government of India and the British government in the way they were supporting this. But of course, I can imagine that there was a lot of anxiety, especially with the consular staff, families, and friends. We whenever we have any occasions when we get together, when High Commission invites community members, whether it's Republic Day or Independence Day, so it's like a family affair always. So I can imagine, when something this tragic would have happened, it would have created a lot of fear and anxiety within the community, as well as the staff, as well as the families as well. Now, given this happened in Birmingham, which has a very strong that British, Pakistani, Kashmiri, Mirpur diaspora community as well. So I can imagine, if there were family members from consulate who were living in areas where there may have been more of those communities, could have created some sort of a fear element in them as well. So I think those kind of factors would have played a part. I think Asha ji did mention that the British police was very, very professional in the way they dealt with the incident. But when you look at the larger picture, there are still a number of questions that remain unanswered in terms of whether justice was done in the right way, whether all the perpetrators were found, and if they were also found, for example, one of them was actually apprehended in United States of America many years ago based on his foot fingerprints. But
Fingerprints.
but there was a court case which ran in Birmingham after that, and he was actually acquitted from the case.
Hmm.
Which again is, it's a travesty of justice in some ways, when after so many years of effort, if police and other services are able to apprehend one of the perpetrators of the crime, and he then gets acquitted. So I think there are still unanswered questions from that perspective, from a legal and jurisprudence perspective. But I think the community would have been very, very angry and fearful at the time as well.
Vinodji, we'll come back to you if that's okay, but I just wanted to go to Siddharth Acharya ji primarily because he comes from that legal background and he's got a astute understanding of what could have played out from a legal perspective. Because here was a man who was clearly, his fingerprints were found on those weapons, and his only excuse at the end of the day was the fact that he was mentally unstable, and that was the pretext on the back of which he was essentially let to go free. So give us a bit of an insight, Siddharji, if you may, on
Yes,
the
yes,
legal aspect of this case, please.
definitely. So in law, we always discuss, whenever I've heard a lot of these legal scholars, and whenever we discuss it internally among the fraternity, we always say that there are few convictions which doesn't bring closure to the case, and I would say diplomat Ravindra Matreji's case is one of them. Coming back to the question which you asked me specifically about this acquittal that had happened, that infamous acquittal of Mohammad Aslim Mirza, who was also one of the co-accused, uh, against whom the charges were framed by the Birmingham District Court. What happened was that there was conclusive evidence against him. There were a lot of references. There were a lot of a lot of people who were witnesses who were ready to testify in against this person. But however, the legal setup and system, the judicial system, was such that this person was not convicted. And also, apart from him, he was just a small fish. He was just a small fry among the other convicts who were
The
there. So a
perpetrators.
lot of people. Yes, yes, yes. I mean, Riaz was there. Then this Qayyum was there. I mean, they were convicted that only for 20 years. But the event or something of that earth-shattering event that happened, you deserve to be hanged. And I have three questions. I think still after this case is over, and I mean, this is almost now 40 years. We are in the 39th year of, after this assassination and the abduction has happened. The few questions are still unanswered. One is, did state do enough to prosecute these accused people? To bring Ravindra Mantri.
When you talk about the state, you're talking about the British
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
political
Yes. Yes.
system
Yes.
and
Yes.
and
Yes.
the
Yes.
judiciary
Yes.
system.
Yes. Yes. Where the incident has happened. Yes, so that is one thing. Second thing is also, somewhere I personally feel there have been instances. Now this event occurred in 1984. At that time, we were going through a very turbulent phase where we were facing this whole Khalistani secessionist movement.
Khalistani. Yeah.
Yes, at the same time, the war which was waged against India by Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front and its splinter organizations. So thing is that somewhere in 1984, after this incident happened, after 10 months, after 9 months, the prime minister was killed. She was assassinated, and after that, if you remember, the Pakistan, the reins of Pakistan was in hand of a dictator, Ziaul Haq, and that was a time when we were basically trying to reconcile. We're trying to build peaceful relations with Pakistan. Somewhere, I think his death, the sacrifice of Ravindra Matre was somewhere, was just forgotten by the, in order to basically solidify and make peaceful relations with Pakistan. So that is one thing. I think there's something which has happened in the history. But I have spoken to a lot of these senior diplomats across, in India as well as in UK. There's still a lot of community sentiment. I think especially in the whosoever, let's say whosoever goes on the mission to represent in the Indian High Commission, or for that matter any IFS officer who
Mhm.
he's aware about the story, what has happened.
Of
So there was a
course.
lot of diplomatic support, the deep state support, which was there, because they really felt bad, because they actually felt that
He
this
was part of a
incident.
family.
Exactly. He was a part of the family,
Yeah.
he was part of the fraternity. And this, like I said, this was basically, it wasn't a symbolic attack. Because a lot of this
Hmm.
Western press and also an intelligentsia community in India, they tried to portray this incident as a symbolic attack against the
Hmm.
Indian government, against the Indian system, against the Indian
Against the
bureaucracy.
state of India. Yeah.
Exactly, because
Okay.
they were basically they wanted to
Hmm.
get Makbul but free. But I don't
Hmm.
consider it as a symbolic attack. I consider this as a war waged against India by JKLF. Legally speaking, it was an act of war. It was an act of war which was dismissed by the British government. I mean, I've read a lot of articles where Margaret Thatcher
Yep.
actually extended her
Yep.
support to Avinash Matre, Mr. Ravindra Matre's brother. They
Hmm.
said that we'll try to extradite the accused from Pakistan. We'll bring them to the
Pakistan.
trial. Yes, but
Yep.
like I mean, somebody who actually had committed to impose to cut India into 1,000 pieces, Ziaul Haq. You cannot
Or
expect from a
bleed India with 1,000 cuts.
bleed India into 1,000 cuts. You cannot expect from some dictator like him to agree to these kind of extradition requests.
Fair
So
point.
all that, yes, yes. So I think that, yes, please.
Other,
Fair
other,
point. S-
other, I'd like to mention something here. Uh,
Sure. Sure.
I think one of the points that Vinod also tried to make was the role of the British state at that point in time. And
I was
there's a
just going to
question.
come to that. So
There's a
Ganju,
question that even Asha ji asked.
Sanjay ji, Sanjay ji, can I just keep you on hold for just 1 minute before I just want to ask this particular question to Vinod ji, and then I'll come to you, and then follow that up with Rajinder ji and Sanjay ji as well. So, how complicit was the state in the affairs? I mean, even if we look at the JKLF politics that has played out in Birmingham, you mentioned the Mirpuri community that lives in Birmingham, Vinod ji. Uh, they have been fighting this cause for a very long time, and they've been getting a lot of patronage by the polity of Britain. Sometimes the Labour Party wants to give them a lot of support. The Conservatives do not want to touch them with a barge pole, but yet do not want to talk about the kind of ill activities that they have executed on the British land for such a long time. So, how complicit do you feel are the British authorities, the British polity, and uh, the communities in general?
Yeah. So Adit, to answer that question, it's a very it's a it's a simple question, but the answer is very very complicated. So just to set the context, given this abduction and assassination, ultimately the hooks of this linked link back to Jammu and Kashmir in some ways, and the Kashmir dispute, as it is called, between India and Pakistan. British government or British establishment always has a formal stated position that it's a matter between India and Pakistan to resolve. So that has been their stated policy for many, many years, and it continues to be their stated policy for many, many years. Having said that, there are elements within the British polity, British deep state, British secret services, or other agencies or other sympathetic groups where I sometimes wonder whether there is a deliberate lack of understanding of the situation on the ground, and how terrorism has manifested itself in the region, and therefore who is responsible for that, and therefore what should be the responsibility of the British state, given they call themselves, almost the beacons of human rights
Mhm.
and world order. So that is one question I've always asked myself, and I would always ask every British politician I would speak to. So there is an element of there's that question mark which does sit on British policy making from that point of view, and it sort of manifested itself even in this case from the point of view of how it was handled post assassination, from a jurisprudence point of view, from a legal point of view, given the number of years it took even to find some of the perpetrators, and given a number of them have ultimately gone. I mean, there were some convictions, but there hasn't the degree of conviction that should have happened, and the swiftness that should have happened has not been seen. Imagine a similar kind of an incident happening in India, where a British diplomat would have gone through this kind of an unfortunate situation. The entire West would have been on India's neck, right? To to uh, to react and to respond to that in a very different way. So I think that is the kind of parallel we need to draw when we are analyzing this situation. And I would leave it there. I still think the British establishment is always always has a good intention when it comes to some of these matters, but there are other factors at play as well,
There are
which
other
cannot be
political compulsions.
fully explained. Some of them are what you mentioned, which is British politics itself, being a democratic setup, it is driven by vote bank politics. A lot of the politicians are driven by vote bank, and given that the British Mirpuri population have some say in certain pockets, in certain towns and cities, and therefore the politicians have to listen to them. That also causes these kind of reactions at times.
So you're essentially saying it's the political assertiveness of the community that essentially drives that electoral politics, which is why the polity itself has to tread on politically correct lines, so to speak.
I think there are two dimensions. One dimension is that I think there is still some sort of a hangover when it comes from a British colonial
Hmm.
mindset point of view, in terms of how do they keep that balance and checks and balances in the subcontinent. So there's often that tendency of playing India and Pakistan against each other to keep those checks and balances. So there is that element, and the second element when it comes to British democracy, I fully agree with you. I think given there's a strong Pakistani British Mirpuri diaspora here who bring in 20, 30 MPs into the parliament, so they
Hmm.
always have a much stronger say in the parliament.
Fair point. Sorry, Siddharth Ganjuji, you wanted to add in and chime in on this particular line. So, if there's anything to continue on this.
Yes, absolutely. So I do agree with a lot of what Vinod has said, but I also believe that you know, and now a lot has been written about that angle as well. That the genesis of the Kashmir dispute actually lies in the Cold War, the West versus the Soviet bloc, right? And we know where JKLF came from. It did not come about overnight. It started with the plebiscite front in the mid 50s, which and it evolved into morphed into JKLF at that point in time. Now, I in my very humble opinion, from what I understand. The fact that JKLF had the level of support or the level of organization in United Kingdom to pull off an event of this magnitude means there has to be some sort of a blind eye which was turned to with their activities in United Kingdom at that point in time. Now, what happened subsequently? There's a point that Ashaji made as to typically when there's a kidnapping, you don't have that turning into a murder in 2 days. So, what was it that triggered that panic amongst the kidnappers, wherein Ravindra Mahatraji was murdered in 2 days? So, these are questions that need to be asked, that
But
need
do
to
you
be
not
asked.
believe that there was some laxity from our side as well, where the coordination was not, a lot of the media reports of the time essentially
So, other
suggest that, the coordination of our own external affairs ministry was not perfect at the time, which is why, they were running helter skelter.
So, other, where I come from, and the fact that as a young teen who was a part of the events at that point in time, unwillingly, unwittingly, I did, and courtesy my grandfather as well, I did end up spending a lot of time into reading what was happening around this event and incident at that point in time. And one of my memories is uh, that there was a lot of pressure from the government of India, and there were also hypotheses that evolved at that point in time that the Scotland Yard brought in more pressure than was required to handle a sensitive kidnapping of this nature, which is what spooked the killers and which is what ended up into a tragic murder of Ravindra Mahatraji. Indian government was supposed to take a hard line. No government. We all know what happened in the December of 1989 when Rubia Sayyid was kidnapped, and the fallout of that. So no government
Of
worth
course.
its salt anywhere in the world would want to take a bargaining position with the terrorists, especially day one.
Sure. Sure. Uh, Ganjuji, thank you so much. Rajinder ji and Sanjay ji, sincere apologies because it's taken so long to come to the both of you. So I'll start with Rajinder ji pehle. So Rajinder ji, Asha ji and Ganju sir have both touched upon this very contentious kidnapping of Rubina Sayed, Mufti Mahmud Sayed's daughter, who was essentially kidnapped, back in the 80s, and then she was let go because the state essentially decided to yield to the demands of the terrorists. The question that I will be asking you is, what is the relevance of JKLF in today's context? Pakistan cut its funding of JKLF on the pretext that they had turned into a pro-independence group rather than a Hizbul Mujahideen kind of a group that essentially wanted to free Jammu and Kashmir from India. However, time and time we have seen again and again that JKLF and Hizbul members have worked together to destabilize India. In 2005, India has allowed Yasin Malik to essentially travel to Pakistan, and where he meets Amanullah Khan and gets JKLF reignited in some sense. So, who within our administration, if one was to self introspect, would you blame? Is it the polity, the intelligence, or both of it? What has been your understanding of this subject, Rajendra ji?
See, before I come to today, I think I'll just take a minute or so in connecting it back for the simple reason that as we talk about DTLF, we don't have to miss on Palabas Friends, which was essentially started by Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah, by de facto putting Mirza Mohammed Abdul Beg as its head. But it started off from there, and the first meeting that was done was in 1975 when Indra Sheikh Accord was signed, I think due diligence was not done on Pelagosset front, though they said we have resolved it. But its route connected to JKLF, and Farouk was a part of JKLF. 1984, when it happened, everything was in place. You handed over power to Sheikh Mohammed. So that means from 75 to 84 for 9 good years, you did not demolish infrastructure to him. Because if he had come to an understanding with the government of India that he takes back the reins without even getting elected in the first instance, so why should he not be asked to do his part of demolition of the structure, which he did not, because it was not negotiated well with him. So what happened essentially that JKL remained alive, slightly in suspended animation is what it all started. And let's understand that Mr. Ganju was the gentleman who handed over the first uh, sentence to him. We should know that Maqbool was handed a death sentence twice for killing the CID officer, and second time it was killing the
Um,
back officer when he
I'm not sure whether it's just me, Rajendra ji, but I'm getting a lot of echo from your mic, so the sound quality is not very great.
is it better now?
Yeah, it's much better now. It's much more audible.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So the question is that when second time it happened during this entire period, government of India was absolutely lax. They took this as an one-off event, and they say that they picked up some people and all, but essentially this entire problem was not solved because the entire infrastructure was still in place. Talking about that what happened thereafter, it continued to be. You have these people even today. They have links in Malaysia, they have links in Turkey, and they have links in London for sure. So this
Okay.
entire network
Okay.
exists as of today also. So if we see that we did
Right.
something that time,
Right.
we always
राजेंद्र जी, sincere apologies, आपकी आवाज बिल्कुल मतलब नहीं आ रही है, मतलब it's quite distorted, I would say. So maybe you want to put on a set of headphones or one of those kind of things. We'll come back to you
okay, okay,
in a bit. But Vinodji, one question that I essentially left out uh, before we go to Sanjay ji is about the Justice Party, the People's Justice Party angle, and how much they have been at the center of the politics that has played out in Birmingham. They were quite active at one point between 1998 and 2006, and then they have essentially demonstrated that again and again, the political assertiveness is what makes them absolutely invaluable in a sense to the British polity. थोड़ा सर उसके बारे में अगर हमको बता सके about the People's Justice Party which has operated in Birmingham.
Vinod is
You're on
unmuted.
mute. You're on mute, Vinod. Sorry, sorry, guys. I think the most important thing to note here is that when you talk about Justice Party, it is essentially the manifestation or the metamorphization of the same origins. Everything. I mean, these groups started from when they used to call themselves NLF, right? Jammu Kashmir National Liberation Front. And over the years, once after Matreji's assassination, there was this big movement to free some of these terrorists who were either convicted or who were going through various stages of conviction. So these are the same people, same actors, same groups who over time morphed in from NLF into JKLF to in the UK once JKLF was formed by Amanullah Khan. Over the years, then as that movement fizzled out and JKLF split into two groups when Yasin Malik and Amanullah, went in different paths. So Justice Party is one of the splinter, almost like a manifestation from the same line of thought, same political thought process, which has become more relevant in the modern times in British polity with respect to this whole secessionist mindset when it comes to Jammu and Kashmir, and that whole support and the ecosystem that they have built around the narrative, which essentially talks about Indian state as an oppressor and
Mhm,
everybody else as oppressed, right? Especially the
mhm,
Muslims as oppressed rather than
mhm.
the residents of the region, right? If you ask people from Justice Party or any of those sympathetic groups, what about Kashmiri Hindus and Pandits who had to leave their home lock, stock, and barrel 30 plus years ago? They go quiet, they go mum about it. So, Justice Party, or
They,
tomorrow it might become an
they
Injustice
aren't,
Party,
of
Injustice
course.
Party, or some other party. They have no standing on human rights for anybody. It is just a particular narrative which is supported by a particular ideology, and
Ideology.
that ideology and narrative plays on British soil today as well.
But the point that I essentially wanted to get your insight was on the fact that People's Justice Party ran on a single issue for 10 years, and that single issue was essentially that demanding that the British government pressurize India in support of the Muslims in Kashmir. That was their agenda at the end of the day, and that is what they ran for a good part of 10 years. Why is it that we as a community did not take notice of this and put out our political assertiveness to say this is wrong to actually play out South Asian politics in Britain?
I think the answer lies in our community and our value system in many ways, because as a community, as we have landed on these shores over the last 50, 60 years from various quarters, whether Indian community coming from Africa, whether in the new wave coming from India as technocrats and doctors and stuff, our basic upbringing and value system is, wherever we go, we try and assimilate with that cultural
Hmm.
setup, with that way of life, and then we also focus
Rather than
on
impose.
educating ourselves, upward movement for our families, our community. So we're always focusing on the welfare, our welfare, and the wider community welfare. So as a society, we are less inclined towards being more let's say activist oriented by default, right?
Hmm.
So I think
Hmm.
that's one of the reasons we've always found it hard to get together, to assimilate as various Indian groups, and to then start countering and creating our own narrative and agenda. But I think times are changing. I think the
Yeah.
Indian community is much more involved now. They are much more aware, and you see there's a lot of convergence now. But I think maybe
Hmm.
Sanjay, given
I
he's
Yeah,
think,
running
I was
one of
just
the
uh,
going to go
yeah,
to I was
he's
just
yeah,
going
I
running
to
think
go to
media
Sanjay Ji.
media has also
he
played a
he
partially a
yeah
part
Sanjay
there, what they
Sanjay
wanted to project.
Sanjay is running one of the diaspora community, Kashmiri community
Absolutely.
groups
Yeah.
here in the UK. He can shed more light on some of this.
So Sanjay ji,
Yeah,
I was going to come to you next on this particular subject. So, what has been your experience of because you've actively been part of this sort of activism and this to ensure that the Kashmiri voices can, the Indian side of the Indian narrative can be heard also within the British polity. That was something which was missing from the early 80s into the 90s and early 2000, which is now slowly changing, given the fact that we are also coming out with our own stories. Kashmir Files was one of those kind of portrayals of what the ghastly kind of exodus of the Kashmiri Pandits that happened in 1989 has been one of them. So, what's been your take on this particular political assertiveness aspect of the JKLF?
I think we know touched it partially, but I think I would like to extend it that media has played a big role, and we always believed, uh, particularly in India, that BBC is all what they show is truth. And recently, the instance we have seen, what they have shown is the kind of an good reflection what was happening, and that I think it goes back down to that. What has media been showing, and we believed in that, and partially there is a political bias, whether that is purely because of numbers, as Vinod mentioned. There's a quite a chunk of pockets in within the UK which are filled with the Mirpuris and while and they have a big chunk of votes, and they send the parliamentarians to the to the uh, uh, to the the parliament, and for that, I think that plays a big role. But I think I would like to bring everyone to for a minute that it is a big honor for all of us to remember Ravindra Matre, which is why we are here, who has laid down his life for the nation, basically. And merely for what? I know we mentioned we are going to keep the emotions and the politics apart from it, but I, being a Kashmiri Pandit and running the Kashmiri Pandit organization, I can't take my emotions out of it, merely because we are the victims of the same thought process, same jihadi mindset, and we have suffered in the same. It was really, my wounds were bleeding, started bleeding when Ashaji was mentioned, the way when the Matriji was abducted and kept for 2 days, and the same thing happened to a lot of our community members in Kashmir, and we were frightened, and I mean, when we were killed, butchered, raped our sisters. I think that part there's a, if you join the dots, you will find the link. In 1994, the first incident started also for our, attacks on our community in Anantnag in Kashmir. That was the beginning of the our recent exodus or genocide. That's how when it started. But coming back to the question which you primarily asked, I think primarily we are small in the at least the Hindu community in the UK was very limited now, and media has played a big role, and we were relying on most of the print media and the print media, and now thanks to the social media, the things are coming up in a nice way, things, and we are converging together now. We are making sure our voice is heard and truth is coming out.
Okay, thank you, Sanjay ji. एक और सवाल था मेरा आपसे, which is basically about the fact that most of these people who actually talk about Kashmir to the British politicians are truly not Kashmiris. They are Jammuites, or they are from what one would say Pakistan occupied Jammu Kashmir. Why have we not been able to essentially टेल द ब्रिटिश पॉलिटी कि ये तो भाई कश्मीरी है ही नहीं, आप इनसे आप ये कश्मीर फ्रीडम के बारे में बात करते हैं, और जो वाकई में जो कश्मीरी है वो तो they are the ones sitting on the Indian side of the fence. They're not the ones that come from Mirpur and from the Neelam Valley and from Gilgit. So why have we not been able to talk about that issue?
No, we have been. I think, as I mentioned, we are very so small in the numbers. We have been time and again, and recently we have been every year. We put our point of view in front of the politicians, in front of the media people, but we are so small in numbers that it's somehow getting suppressed or unheard. It's not that we are not raising our voices. We're not reaching out to the politicians. Mirpur they can't even speak Kashmiri. There's a quite a big
Precisely.
chunk of Mirpuri's pocket to where I live. They can't even speak Kashmiri and they claim to be the Kashmiris. And these are the big numbers which are supporting the JKLF and still running this organization, although it's banned, they're still running. But it is merely the numbers, basically. It's not that we are not raising our voices. We do raise our voices, but I think it's merely they are
It's
big
the
in
fact that
numbers,
we've not been able
but I
to
think now I
collate the
think
numbers.
yeah, thanks to the social media, I think we know is one of our very active in this regard. I think we are speaking in every
Mhm,
front wherever
mhm,
possible and trying to
mhm,
raise our voice, and thanks to the Vivek Agnihotri ji recently, I think
mhm.
everyone knows our story now.
Of course. Rajinder ji, I'm going to come back to you now,
Yeah.
sir. Sincere apologies. बहुत
No, no,
वक्त लग गया.
no, my problem.
Okay, so do you just want to come back to that particular topic that we were touching on,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
the relevance of JKLF in today's politics, not only from a British polity perspective but also Indian politics?
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. See, I think we have to understand that JKLF is not gone anywhere. What you say are the mutations of JKLF. The stationery will change, the letterheads will change. It is the same organization, a different variant. But essentially, if you see the secessionist movement has been taking different forms and shapes. But the problem is here that government of India, when we say we are asking questions regarding why we have not been able to convey that these are not essentially Kashmiris. Now, this narrative ought to have come from government of India. May not be directly, but indirectly, because the narrative should have been woven by our Minister of External Affairs. And then different groups would have gone through with the same common narrative. Because for India, it has been outsourced. Kashmir's problem has been outsourced from JKLF. So JKLF being our biggest enemy outside of India should have been taken up by India, Ministry of External Affairs, and countered on various formats. If you see how JKLF did it, they did it in Pakistan, they did it in UK, and then they picked up Kashmiri guys. Who is the son-in-law of Amanatullah Khan? It is Mr. Lone. They tried to pick up that time his father, who was later on assassinated. So if you find all the killings, all the things or major events, you will find the footprints of JKLF somewhere. So somewhere government of India did not measure the potency of it all. If I had to take a 30-second cue, if you see this sequence of events, I'm talking about that when this abduction took place, that the External Affairs Minister was not in Delhi, the PM was not in Delhi. They landed in Delhi at around 5 o'clock. So the crisis management group met at around 9 o'clock. What happened? They said, let's meet at 12 o'clock next day. They met at 12 o'clock to decide, now let's wait, see what happens. Because the enormity of this problem has not been understood by government of India. The potency of JKLF has not been understood. Otherwise, when Indira Sheikh Accord was signed, this should have been the first point on the table, dismantling of JKLF, because the umbilical cord of JKLF was ultimately what we talk about, the Plebiscite Front, led by Sheikh Abdullah and Mirza Muhammad Afzal Beg. So this is where we have been faltering ever since 1947. You kept him for 22 years away from politics, but you did not dismantle, you did not attack JKLF. Even today, I can tell you that JKLF has not been neither fully exposed nor been taken on, and you have to attack it on multiple fronts. That is where the failure takes place. Then our diaspora,
Yeah,
Indian
and
diaspora
they are
would
still
definitely
operating
come in.
here as well in UK
So
with
True.
different
a
names.
quick
One
point.
one
A
of one
quick
of the
point.
points that essentially has been raised is why has the government of India not taken enough space or enough steps to essentially ban JKLF in India? Because if they essentially take a step to ban JKLF in India, then there has to be some accountability from the British government towards what JKLF is doing
Yeah,
in
But
I'll
Kashmir.
but
quickly
the
30
point,
seconds
Aditi,
before
is
Ganju
that
Saab
you
comes
can
in.
ban it, but as Ravinderji mentioned, they will
Sanjay ji,
open the
let Rajendra ji
organization
finish
in.
and then we'll come to you if that's okay. Ji Rajendra ji.
Okay. See, what I'm saying is that in the 20-year period that we have been discussing, Mr. Dullat, he has been misleading government of India on the treatment to these organizations, which essentially is talking about JKLF. So the garden path which he led government of India, I'm not exonerating government of India, but the man at the ground level, he gave a different direction to government of India. Had he told them that JKLF is the major apparatus which you have to dismantle, it would have started from there. So we lost the plot in 1986, 87, and right up to the next 20 years when he was at the helm of the affairs, even during the regime of Mr. Vajpayee. So we lost the major 2 decades to dismantle it. And then it spread the tentacles. And even today, if you ask me, we are still not understood the import of having JKLF. We feel that it's a diluted organization, but it has various branches, various sister concerns and all, but this remains the parent organization. And if you ask me, Dr. Farooq has been one of the champions of JKLF. So let's not forget that part of it.
Absolutely.
Ji Sanjay ji,
So
you wanted to
other
chime in.
No, no,
quickly,
I was
I
just saying that I think they, as Ravinderji rightly mentioned, I think they are operating with the different names. I think the only way forward is to basically eradicate them from the root and identify who is financing them. Unless you break them or hurt them while it hurts most, they will continue with the different names here in UK as well as in India.
Thank you. Ganju sir.
So, Adit, just wanted to add to what Ravindraji was mentioning. It's a commonly known secret on the streets of Kashmir that JKLF derives its cadre by and large from the National Conference, like PDP derives its cadre by and large from the Jamaat Islami and Hizbul Mujahideen.
Okay. Some some very profound statements coming right there.
But that's what
Acharya
you go
ji,
to Kashmir.
Yeah,
You go
that's
to
a fact.
Kashmir, everybody knows it.
Yes.
Everybody talks
Correct, correct,
about it.
correct.
It's just that we are not willing to acknowledge it.
Yes.
fair point.
It's
Siddharth ji.
it's an international militant organization. It should have been banned by even the Indian state should have had made some diplomatic efforts to get it banned. Also, one more important point which I wanted to bring to this discussion was about the involvement of people like Hashim Qureshi and Amanullah Khan at that point of time. Hashim
Yeah.
Qureshi was found to be in Birmingham at that point of time when the assassination of Ravindra Mataji had happened, but the probe did not happen on his involvement because you don't know with whom he was siding at that point of time. And after in the coming years, he claimed double jeopardy in the Ganga hijacking case in
Exactly.
India. He was granted double jeopardy because he claimed that he was already prosecuted in Pakistan between 1971 to 1980. He was in jail in Lahore. And when he came to India, we did not put him to the trial. We simply gave him a free, red carpet welcome that you come to India, you stay here, and you do your politics. So
He was
this is
brought he was
yeah.
brought back
He was
promising to
brought
be
back
made the,
exactly in
promising
1994.
promise to be made the chief minister of Jammu and
Made the
Kashmir.
chief minister of Jammu and Kashmir by none other than Mr. Yazdullah. So the thing is, these are the things which Kashmir has been victim of. These are the kind of narratives which we have been fallen into trap of, and coming like I said that these the involvements should have been probed, should have been examined at that point of time when the trial was happening. But as a state, I mean, we also did not do much. So I completely agree with Rajendra ji when he said that you cannot exonerate Indian state also completely. When we talk only about the trial of Ravindra Matre, the Indian state also should have done much more than what they did. And I think even the result which they achieved in the conviction, like I spoke in my previous this thing, is only because of the motivation and the effort of few bureaucrats who actually felt that this has to be avenged. Otherwise, we wouldn't have even come up to that stage. So this is the reality, sad reality.
Thank you, Acharya ji. It's sad that at the end of it all, when we look at it from a simple prism of things, Ravindra Matre ji is no longer with us. He was 48 when his life was unfortunately taken away in a very very gruesome way. His daughter, who was only 13 at the time, had to grow up without a father for the best part of her adolescent years, and those are scars which are not going to be easy to heal. And that is something which we're going to carry forward year on year, and we will keep commemorating him. Each third of February, that we come forward with. On that note, last words from Vinodji, and then we will close this session today.
Yeah, thank you, Aditji, and I would like to thank all of our participants who came in. I know some of you've had to be awake very late in India to participate in this. And our thoughts to Mahatreji and his family. It was a very sad uh, and a very tragic event that happened, and what we should learn from this is that as a community we need to back each other, and we need to make sure that whether we are in India or any other shores, we are always uh, working together to ensure that if something happens, or if we need to show that strength together, then we are able to come together as a community and support each other, whether it is in diplomatic circles, whether it's in the community space, or whether it's in any other social spaces. So that would be my message. But thank you very much, all of you, for coming in today and
Thank you so much,
taking
Vinodji.
the
Thank
time
you,
out.
Siddharth
Thank you.
Acharya
Thank
ji,
you, Vinod.
Ravinder ji,
Thank you.
Sanjay,
Thank you.
Sanjay
Thank you
ji,
so much.
Siddharth, Chandu ji, Vinod ji, and Asha ji, who's no longer here with us. But thank you all for chiming in with your thoughts on this sad and very gruesome event that happened 39 years ago. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Bye.
Bye. Good night.